What if the greatest scientific breakthrough in human history came with a price no one was willing to pay? Governments have denied it for decades, but declassified documents and leaked testimonies tell a different story. Secret laboratories, volunteer subjects, machines designed to tear holes in the fabric of time itself. Some experiments succeeded beyond imagination, but the subjects who stepped through those portals, they never came back. These are the 10-time travel experiments where people vanished forever. Imagine it's the winter of 1961. The Cold War is at its peak. The Soviet Union and the United States are locked in a desperate race, not just for nuclear supremacy, but for something far more dangerous, something that could change the very nature of warfare itself. Control over time. Deep beneath the frozen earth of Krasnodar in southern Russia, Soviet scientists were allegedly working on a project so secret that even the Kremlin's inner circle knew almost nothing about it. A project codenamed Zerkalo, the Russian word for mirror. And according to documents that surfaced decades later, they were about to attempt something no government had ever tried before. They were going to send a living human being through time. The subject they selected was Lieutenant Dmitry Volkov, a 28-year-old decorated pilot known for his extraordinary psychological resilience. He had survived 3 combat missions that should have killed him. He had nerves of absolute steel, and he had volunteered without hesitation when the program directors explained what they needed. Someone willing to step into the unknown and trust that the machine would bring him back. The device itself was massive. A cylindrical electromagnetic chamber nearly 4 meters tall, constructed using research captured from German scientists after World War II, combined with cutting-edge Soviet particle physics. The interior was lined with copper coils that generated fields so powerful they reportedly caused nosebleeds in anyone standing too close. The plan was simple in theory. Volkov would enter the chamber, the electromagnetic field would accelerate to a precise frequency, and if the calculations were correct, Dmitry Volkov would be displaced exactly 24 hours into the future, 1 day forward, proof that the impossible was possible. On the morning of the experiment, Volkov reportedly walked into the chamber wearing a simple flight suit and carrying nothing but a small notebook to document what he observed. Witnesses say he smiled at the technicians before the heavy steel door sealed shut behind him. Then, the machines began to hum. What happened next has been described by multiple sources, though their accounts vary in terrifying ways. Some say the air inside the facility grew thick, almost gelatinous, as if reality itself was struggling to hold its shape. Others describe a sound like thunder played in reverse, a deep rumbling that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The lights flickered, instruments went haywire, and then came a flash so bright that it burned after images into the eyes of everyone present. When the light faded and the chamber door was opened, Dmitry Volkov was gone. No body, no uniform, no notebook, just an empty chamber and the lingering smell of ozone. The scientists waited. 24 hours passed, then 48, then a week. Volkov never reappeared. The chamber remained empty. The future, it seemed, had swallowed him whole. But here is where the story takes its most chilling turn. 3 days after Volkov's disappearance, monitoring equipment began detecting something impossible. A voice transmission on frequencies the facility was not broadcasting. Technicians recognized it immediately. It was Volkov's voice. But something was horribly wrong. He was speaking backward. The words were reversed, garbled, as if the recording was being played in the wrong direction. When analysts finally managed to decode the transmission, they found he was repeating a series of coordinates over and over. Coordinates that corresponded to a location in Siberia, a location that would not be developed until 1987. How could a man displaced in time be broadcasting from a place that did not yet exist? The Soviet government moved quickly to bury everything. All personnel were reassigned to remote postings. The facility was sealed and classified at the highest levels. Dmitry Volkov was officially listed as having died in a routine training flight accident in February 1961. The Zerkalo project was erased from existence. But in 2019, the grandson of one of the original technicians posted his grandfather's deathbed confession online, complete with hand-drawn sketches of the chamber and fragments of the decoded transmission. The post was deleted within hours, but copies had already spread across the internet. According to official Soviet records, Lieutenant Dmitry Volkov died in a plane crash before the experiment ever took place. But according to the people who were actually there, he walked into that chamber alive and simply never came back. So, where is Dmitry Volkov? Is he still falling through time somewhere, broadcasting coordinates to places that haven't been built yet? And if the Soviets succeeded in opening a door through time, what else might have come through? Now, picture this. You're a soldier in 1972. You've served your country with distinction. You've completed missions most people will never know existed. And now you're standing in an underground facility somewhere beneath the Nevada desert, surrounded by scientists in white coats and military officers with expressions that betray nothing. They're asking you to do something no human being has ever done before. Step onto a platform surrounded by massive metal rings, and let them send you backward through time, 100 years into the past. You'll be there for 60 seconds. Then they'll bring you home. That's the promise. But some promises, once broken, can never be fixed. Staff Sergeant Michael Chen was 34 years old when he volunteered for Project Hourglass. A special forces operative with top-secret clearance and a reputation for completing impossible assignments, Chen was exactly the kind of soldier the program needed. Someone who could think clearly under pressure. Someone who wouldn't panic when reality itself began to bend. Someone expendable enough that his disappearance could be explained away without raising suspicion. The technology behind Hourglass remained classified for decades, but leaked documents suggest it involved a ring of superconducting magnets arranged in a precise geometric pattern. Some researchers believe the core components were reverse engineered from materials of unknown origin, materials recovered from crash sites the government has never acknowledged. Whatever its source, the device was designed to create what scientists called a temporal displacement field, a bubble of warped space-time that could theoretically transport matter to different points along the timeline. The mission parameters were straightforward. Chen would step onto the central platform. The magnetic array would activate, generating a field powerful enough to tear a hole in the fabric of time itself. He would be displaced exactly 100 years backward to 1872, observe his surroundings for 60 seconds, and then an automatic retrieval sequence would pull him back to the present. Simple, clean, controlled. On the morning of the experiment, Chen reportedly made a single request. He asked to carry his military dog tag, the one his father had given him before his first deployment. A good luck charm. The scientists saw no harm in allowing it. At precisely 600 hours, the array powered up. Witnesses describe a low vibration that seemed to penetrate their bones, followed by a high-pitched whine that climbed beyond the range of human hearing. The air around Chen began to shimmer like heat rising from summer pavement. His body became translucent, almost ghostly, and then, between one heartbeat and the next, he was gone. The retrieval sequence activated exactly 60 seconds later. The platform hummed. The magnets cycled through their programmed frequencies. But when the field collapsed, Michael Chen was not standing there. The platform was empty. Technicians ran the sequence again, and again. Over the following month, they attempted 17 separate retrievals using every variation of the original parameters. Nothing worked. Wherever Michael Chen had gone, he was beyond their reach. The project was deemed a catastrophic failure. Chen was listed as missing in action during a classified training exercise. His file was sealed. His family was told he died serving his country. And for decades, that appeared to be the end of the story. But in 2019, a geological survey team working near the original test site made a discovery that defied explanation. Buried in sediment that carbon dating confirmed was over 150 years old, they found a military dog tag. The name stamped on its surface was Michael Chen, but it was the back of the tag that changed everything. Someone had scratched 3 words into the metal with what appeared to be a knife or sharp stone. The words read simply, "Don't send more." The handwriting analysis matched samples from Chen's military records. The sediment placement confirmed the tag had been buried in the 1870s, which means Michael Chen survived the displacement. He lived long enough in the past to leave a message. And whatever he experienced there was terrible enough that his final act was a warning to anyone who might follow. What happened to Staff Sergeant Michael Chen in 1872? What did he see that compelled him to carve those desperate words? How long did he wait, watching the horizon, hoping to see the shimmer of a retrieval field that never came. The project files remain classified to this day, but somewhere beneath the Nevada desert, buried in sediment over a century old, a soldier's warning still waits. Don't send more. And the question that haunts researchers to this day is simple. Did anyone listen? What if you could trap a single moment in time and live inside it forever? It sounds almost peaceful when you say it like that. A perfect instant, preserved eternally, free from the chaos of the outside world. But now, imagine being conscious inside that moment, aware that time has stopped, unable to move forward, unable to escape, repeating the same 10 seconds over and over while the world outside continues without you. That is exactly what allegedly happened to Dr. Ingrid Hartman in a laboratory hidden deep in the Swiss Alps in 1988. And what her colleagues witnessed over the following 73 days remains one of the most disturbing accounts in the history of temporal research. Dr. Hartman was a 41-year-old theoretical physicist, brilliant and driven, who had dedicated her entire career to understanding the nature of time. She wasn't interested in traveling to the past or the future. Her obsession was something far more elegant. She wanted to create a localized temporal loop, a contained bubble where time would cycle repeatedly within a defined space while the rest of the universe continued normally. Think of it like a snow globe, but instead of fake snowflakes, the thing being preserved was a moment itself. The applications were theoretically limitless. Medical procedures performed in frozen time, preservation of dying patients until cures could be found, even immortality of a kind, if someone could exist indefinitely within a perfectly maintained loop. The facility where Hartman worked was funded by a consortium of European governments, all of whom saw the strategic potential of controlling time itself. After years of failed experiments and mathematical dead ends, her team finally built a working prototype, a temporal loop generator capable of creating a stable 10-second cycle within a spherical containment field. The plan was simple. Hartman would step into the containment area, the field would activate, creating a bubble around her where the same 10 seconds would repeat continuously. After a predetermined duration, the field would collapse, releasing her back into normal time. She would have experienced only 10 seconds. The outside world would have moved forward by several minutes, a proof of concept that would change everything humanity understood about the universe. Hartman insisted on being the test subject herself. She had designed the equations. She understood the risks better than anyone. On the morning of the experiment, she stepped calmly into the center of the laboratory floor. Her colleagues activated the generator. The air around her began to shimmer, condensing into a visible spherical distortion, approximately 1.7 meters in diameter. Inside the bubble, Hartman smiled and waved to her team. Everything appeared to be working perfectly. Then the bubble's surface turned opaque. Through specialized imaging equipment, scientists could still see inside. Hartman was there, still smiling, still waving, repeating the same sequence of movements every 10 seconds like a video stuck on loop. But the bubble didn't collapse as scheduled. The field had stabilized in a way the equations hadn't predicted. The generator's automatic shutoff failed, and Dr. Ingrid Hartman remained trapped inside. For 73 days, her colleagues watched helplessly as she repeated those same 10 seconds. Smile, wave, look toward the door, slight turn of the head, reset, smile, wave, the same gestures, the same expression, over and over and over. But here is where the horror truly begins. Some observers reported subtle variations in her movements, a slight difference in how her hand rose, a flicker in her eyes that seemed almost like recognition, almost like she was trying to communicate, almost like she was aware. On the 73rd day, the bubble finally collapsed without warning. The shimmering sphere contracted violently and vanished with a sound witnesses described as a thunderclap, played in reverse. But when the light cleared, the space inside was empty. Dr. Ingrid Hartman was gone. No body, no trace, no explanation. Her colleagues later calculated the mathematics of her experience. If she perceived time normally inside the loop, she would have experienced approximately 630,000 repetitions of those 10 seconds. That's 73 days of reliving the same moment with no variation, no rest, no escape. Some believe she went mad long before the bubble collapsed. Others think her consciousness simply couldn't survive that level of repetition and eventually just dissolved. But the question that haunts everyone who studies this case is simple. When the bubble finally collapsed, where did her body go? Was she released into some other timeline? Did the loop eventually consume her entirely? Or is Dr. Ingrid Hartman still out there somewhere, trapped in an endless 10-second cycle, waving at colleagues who can no longer see her, waiting for a rescue that will never come? Imagine you could send someone 50 years into the future and stay in contact with them the entire time. Imagine receiving daily reports about technologies that don't exist yet, cities that haven't been built, events that haven't happened. For 17 days, Chinese scientists allegedly did exactly that. They maintained two-way communication with a man displaced half a century forward in time. Everything was working perfectly. The mission was a complete success. And then on day 17, the subject sent a final transmission that was so disturbing, so fundamentally terrifying, that the entire project was terminated within hours. What he discovered in the year 2053 wasn't just unexpected. It was something that called into question the very nature of time travel itself. The year was 2003. The location was a research vessel stationed on the Yangtze River, serving as mobile cover for one of China's most classified programs. The project was called Xiian, the Mandarin word for time. Unlike Western experiments that focused on massive underground facilities, the Chinese approach was elegant and compact. Their displacement technology used high-frequency resonance to essentially tune matter to different temporal coordinates, the same way a radio tunes to different stations. The subject could theoretically be sent to any point on the timeline with surgical precision. Dr. Liu Wei was the project's lead quantum physicist. He was 39 years old, married to his work, and utterly convinced that his equations were correct. When the program struggled to find volunteers who could pass the psychological screening requirements, Liu made a decision that would change everything. He volunteered himself. The mission parameters were ambitious. Liu would be displaced 50 years forward to the year 2053. He would observe future China, document everything he witnessed, and transmit reports back through a quantum-entangled communication device, a technology that theoretically allowed instantaneous contact across any temporal distance. After a predetermined observation period, retrieval protocols would bring him home. On the morning of the experiment, Liu stepped into a compact displacement pod, barely larger than a phone booth. His colleagues activated the resonance field. Witnesses described the pod filling with a pale blue light that grew increasingly intense until it was impossible to look at directly. Then silence. When the light faded, the pod was empty. Liu Wei was gone. The first transmission arrived 6 hours later. Liu's voice, excited but controlled, describing a world beyond anything he had imagined. Massive technological advances, floating transportation systems that moved without sound, neural interfaces that had become standard for all citizens, allowing direct brain-to-brain communication. The reports continued daily, each one more detailed than the last. For 11 days, the mission proceeded flawlessly. Then on day 12, something changed. Liu's transmissions became erratic. His voice carried an edge of confusion that hadn't been there before. He mentioned seeing versions of himself walking the streets of 2053. Not one version, dozens. Multiple Liu Weis of different ages, all apparently displaced from different points in the timeline, all wandering the same future city. Over the following days, Liu investigated. What he discovered was devastating. The Chinese temporal program hadn't started in 2003. According to records he accessed in 2053, it had been running for decades in the future timeline, sending subjects backward and forward repeatedly. Hundreds of volunteers had been displaced over the years, and not a single one had ever returned to their original timeline. They couldn't. The technology didn't allow it. On day 17, Liu's final transmission arrived. His voice was trembling. The transmission ended. All subsequent communication attempts failed. The research vessel returned to port within 48 hours. Every record was destroyed. Every team member was reassigned to unrelated projects. The Xiian program officially never existed, but one researcher kept backup copies of the audio files, recordings that eventually found their way onto obscure corners of the internet decades later. If Liu's final words are accurate, then time travel doesn't move people through time at all. It copies them into parallel branches while erasing them from the original timeline. Every successful displacement creates infinite duplicates, each one trapped in a different reality with no path home. Liu Wei didn't vanish into the future. He was scattered across infinite possibilities, and in none of them can he ever return. What if you could go back in time and save lives? Not just one life, but hundreds. What if you could change the course of history itself, prevent disasters before they happened, warn people about attacks they never saw coming? It sounds heroic, noble even. But what if the price of saving those lives was your own existence? Not your death, but something far worse. Complete erasure from reality. As if you had never been born at all. That is allegedly what happened to Captain Edward Blackwood, a British intelligence officer who reportedly volunteered for the most ambitious temporal mission ever attempted. He succeeded in changing history, and history in return erased him completely. The year was 1954. Britain was still recovering from the devastation of World War II. The wounds were fresh. The memories of the Blitz, of cities burning, of families torn apart by German bombs, haunted an entire generation. In the classified depths of RAF Rudlow Manor, a team of scientists and military officials were working on something that could have changed everything, a device they called the Cornerstone. The technology's origins remain shrouded in mystery. Some documents suggest the equations came from German scientists captured after the war. Others reference a source the files only identify as future contact, implying that the blueprints for time travel may have come from time travelers themselves. Whatever its origin, the Cornerstone was designed to send a human being backward through time with enough precision to alter specific historical events. Captain Edward Blackwood was the perfect candidate. At 36, he was a decorated intelligence officer with a photographic memory and fluent German. He had served behind enemy lines during the war and understood the strategic landscape of 1940 better than almost anyone alive. His mission was breathtaking in its ambition. Travel back to August 1940, infiltrate the communication networks, transmit intelligence that would allow British forces to anticipate German bombing raids before they happened, save lives that had already been lost. Blackwood accepted without hesitation. On a frozen December morning, he entered the displacement chamber, carrying microfilm documents and a memorized list of dates, locations, and targets. His colleagues activated the machine. Witnesses describe what happened next as deeply unsettling. Blackwood's body didn't shimmer or fade like subjects in other experiments. Instead, he appeared to fold into himself, collapsing inward like paper being crumpled by an invisible hand. Then he was gone. No retrieval was planned. Blackwood was expected to live out his natural life in the past, a permanent insertion into a timeline he would subtly reshape. Researchers anticipated finding evidence of his presence in historical records, a name in a military roster, a photograph in an archive, a grave somewhere in England. They found nothing. Not a single trace of Edward Blackwood existed anywhere in the 1940s. No service records, no identity documents, no death certificate. It was as if he had never arrived at all. But here is where the story becomes truly strange. 3 months after Blackwood's displacement, archivists conducting routine reviews discovered something impossible. Historical documents had changed. Bombing raid records showed different casualty figures than previously recorded. Dates of attacks had shifted slightly, and the total number of deaths from specific raids was lower by exactly 847 people. No one remembered the original figures. When researchers checked their own notes, the new numbers had always been there. The changes appeared to have always been true, as if history itself had been rewritten from the beginning. Blackwood had succeeded. He had saved 847 lives. But in doing so, he had apparently created a paradox so severe that reality could not accommodate his existence. Some theorists believe that changing the past caused a cascade effect that rippled forward through time, erasing every trace of the person responsible. Others suggest that Blackwood still exists somewhere, trapped in a timeline that no longer connects to our own, unable to be remembered by a world he saved. The official records of Operation Cornerstone remain classified to this day. Captain Edward Blackwood has no grave, no memorial, no family who remembers him. The 847 people he saved lived full lives, had children, built families, never knowing that their existence was purchased by a man who paid with his very reality. Did Edward Blackwood make the ultimate sacrifice? Is he still out there somewhere, watching a world that has forgotten him completely? Or did saving those lives require him to have never existed at all? The answer, like Blackwood himself, has vanished from history. What happens when you open a door through time and something else decides to walk through? Most temporal experiments focus on the risks to the traveler, the physical strain, the psychological trauma, the possibility of never returning. But what if the real danger isn't what happens to the person you send? What if the real danger is what comes back in their place? In the summer of 1983, at a facility on the eastern tip of Long Island, researchers allegedly learned this lesson in the most terrifying way possible. They sent a man 40 years into the past. He never returned, but something wearing his shape did. Camp Hero in Montauk, New York, has been the subject of conspiracy theories for decades. Most people dismiss the stories as paranoid fantasy, but according to multiple witnesses who claim to have worked there, the facility housed one of the most ambitious temporal research programs ever attempted. The centerpiece was a device called the Montauk chair, an apparatus that allegedly amplified human psychic potential to levels that could tear holes in the fabric of space-time itself. The chair didn't rely on massive particle accelerators or electromagnetic fields. It used the human mind as its engine, channeling consciousness into a focused beam capable of punching through temporal barriers. The subject for this particular experiment was identified in documents only as Patient 07, a former Navy submariner in his late 20s, selected specifically for what researchers called enhanced psychological stability. His mission was to travel backward 40 years to 1943 and observe the infamous Philadelphia experiment, the legendary naval test that allegedly caused a warship to become invisible and possibly teleport across space. On a humid August morning, 07 was seated in the Montauk chair. Electrodes were attached to his temples. Monitoring equipment tracked his vital signs. When the device activated, witnesses report that his body went rigid. His eyes rolled back. And then he began speaking in languages none of the technicians recognized. Ancient tongues, impossible dialects, words that seemed to twist the air around them. His vital signs spiked to dangerous levels. His body began to flicker like a strobe light, phasing in and out of visibility with increasing speed. And then, between one heartbeat and the next, Patient 07 vanished completely from the chair. Monitoring equipment confirmed he had reached his destination. The temporal coordinates aligned with 1943. The displacement was successful. The retrieval was scheduled for exactly 12 hours later. When the time came, the chair began to hum. The air grew thick with static electricity. Something was materializing in the seat. But what appeared was not Patient 07. Not entirely. The figure had his approximate height and mass. It was wearing his clothes. But witnesses describe it as fundamentally wrong. The proportions were slightly off, as if someone had tried to sculpt a human being from memory, but couldn't quite get the details right. The skin had an almost waxy texture, and the eyes, several witnesses noted with horror, never blinked, not once. The entity didn't speak, didn't respond to questions, didn't acknowledge its surroundings at all. It simply sat there, turning its head slowly to stare at each person in the room, one by one, as if memorizing their faces for some unknown purpose. After 3 hours of silence, the entity stood up from the chair. It walked calmly toward the nearest wall. And then, without breaking stride, it passed directly through the solid concrete as if the barrier didn't exist. It simply dissolved into the stone and was gone. Patient 07 was never found. The entity was never seen again inside the facility. But staff members reported glimpses of it for years afterward. A figure standing motionless at the tree line. A shape watching from the shadows between buildings. Always distant, always watching, always gone before anyone could approach. The final piece of evidence comes from security footage recorded in 1989, 6 years after the experiment. The camera captured a figure matching the entity's description, standing outside the perimeter fence at exactly 3:47 in the morning. It stands perfectly still for several minutes. Then it appears to wave at the camera, a slow, deliberate gesture that seems almost mocking, and then it turns and walks into the darkness, never to be recorded again. What happened to patient 07 in 1943? Why didn't he return? And what exactly took his place in that chair? Some researchers believe he was replaced by something that exists between moments, an entity that used his displacement as a doorway into our reality. The question isn't where 07 went. The question is, what came back instead? And whether it's still out there, watching, waiting. Imagine loving someone so completely that you believe your connection could transcend time itself, that the bond between you is so powerful, so fundamental, that it could anchor you across decades, across centuries, across the very fabric of reality. Now, imagine watching that person be erased from existence, not killed, not lost, erased, as if they had never been born, as if every moment you shared together had been a dream you invented alone. In 2011, a husband and wife stepped onto a temporal displacement platform together, holding hands, believing their love would bring them home. Only one of them returned, and the other didn't just disappear, she stopped existing entirely. Dr. Raj and Dr. Priya Sharma were both 34 years old, married quantum physicists who had dedicated 7 years of their lives to India's most classified research program. The facility was hidden beneath Mumbai, operated by the Defense Research and Development Organization under layers of secrecy so deep that even most government officials didn't know it existed. The program had sent several solo subjects forward through time. None had returned. The retrieval systems failed every time. But the Sharmas had developed a theory. They believed that previous subjects failed to return because they lacked a temporal anchor, an emotional connection, powerful enough to pull them back to their origin point. Love, they argued, might be the missing variable. The bond between two people could create a kind of quantum entanglement that transcended temporal displacement. They volunteered together. The mission would send them 50 years forward to 2061, where they would observe the future for 24 hours before their connection to each other and their life in 2011 would theoretically draw them back. On the morning of the experiment, colleagues reported that the Sharmas seemed calm, even excited. They had spent years preparing for this moment. They stepped onto the platform side by side, fingers intertwined. The displacement field activated. Witnesses describe a brilliant white light that seemed to consume them from the edges inward. And then they were gone, both of them, together into the unknown. The first 3 days passed without incident. No return was expected so soon. Researchers monitored their equipment and waited. On day 7, alarms began screaming throughout the facility. Something was materializing on the platform. When the light faded, Dr. Raj Sharma was lying there alone. But he was not the man who had left. He had aged approximately 40 years. His hair was white. His face was deeply lined. His body showed signs of severe malnutrition. And his eyes, witnesses reported, were the eyes of someone who had seen something that broke him completely. He was catatonic, unresponsive. The only sound he made was a single word, repeated over and over like a broken recording. Gone, gone, gone. But the true horror came when researchers attempted to verify his identity. They accessed personnel files to compare DNA samples, and they discovered something impossible. All records of Dr. Priya Sharma had vanished. Photographs that once showed the couple together now showed only Raj standing alone. Marriage certificates listed him as single. Colleagues who had worked alongside Priya for years had no memory of her whatsoever. It was as if she had never existed, as if the universe itself had forgotten her. 3 weeks later, Raj experienced a brief moment of lucidity. Medical staff rushed to record whatever he could tell them. His words were fragmented, desperate, barely coherent. But what he said changed everything. She tried to come back first. The machine took her twice. Once from 2061. Once from ever having been. I watched her become nothing. I watched her unravel. And then she was gone. Not dead. Gone. Like she was never real. The implications were devastating. The anchor theory had worked, but in reverse. Priya's desperate desire to return had caused the retrieval system to lock onto her so completely, so fundamentally, that it didn't just pull her from the future, it pulled her from existence itself. Dr. Raj Sharma lived for another 8 years in a psychiatric facility, never speaking another coherent word. He died clutching a photograph that showed only himself, standing alone in front of their home. But nurses reported that he would trace the outline of someone beside him, someone the photograph no longer showed. Did Priya Sharma ever exist? Raj remembered her. The empty space in that photograph suggests something was removed, but reality itself has forgotten her completely. And somewhere across the corridors of time, a woman who loved her husband enough to try returning first paid the ultimate price. Not death, erasure, as if she had never been at all. What if there are things watching us from outside of time, not aliens from distant planets, not ghosts from our past, something else entirely, something that exists in the spaces between moments, observing humanity across every possible timeline. In 1977, deep in the frozen wilderness of Patagonia, a man was sent not forward or backward through time, but sideways, into a parallel present where history had taken a different path. He returned for exactly 11 seconds. And what he screamed in those final moments suggested that everything we think we know about time travel, about reality itself, might be terribly, catastrophically wrong. Argentina in 1977 was a nation consumed by darkness. The military junta that had seized power was conducting a brutal campaign of repression, silencing dissidents and making thousands of people disappear. But beneath the surface of that political nightmare, another kind of horror was unfolding. In a secret facility carved into the mountains of Patagonia, scientists working under direct government orders were attempting something no other nation had tried: lateral temporal displacement, not traveling to the past or future, but shifting sideways into an alternate version of the present. A parallel 1977 where different choices had created a different world. The device they built was a converted particle accelerator, modified using theoretical equations provided by German scientists who had fled to Argentina after World War II. The subject they selected was Carlos Mendez, a 29-year-old political prisoner who had been arrested for organizing student protests. He was offered a simple choice: participate in the experiment and earn his freedom, or remain in detention indefinitely. It wasn't really a choice at all. On the morning of the test, Mendez was placed inside a spherical containment vessel at the center of the accelerator ring. The machine would vibrate his molecular structure at frequencies designed to match an alternate timeline, essentially tuning him like a radio signal until he slipped through the barrier between realities. When the accelerator reached critical velocity, witnesses described the sphere beginning to blur. Mendez's form split into multiple overlapping images, as if dozens of versions of him were occupying the same space simultaneously. Then, all the images converged into a single point and vanished. The sphere was empty. Carlos Mendez had crossed into another version of reality. For 6 days, nothing happened. The sphere remained dark and silent. Researchers began to lose hope that their subject would ever return. On the 7th day, alarms erupted throughout the facility. Energy readings spiked to impossible levels. Something was materializing inside the sphere. Carlos Mendez reappeared, but not completely. His body flickered in and out of visibility like a dying light bulb, phasing between solid and transparent. And he was screaming, not in pain, in terror, pure, absolute terror. He remained visible for exactly 11 seconds. During that time, he screamed a string of words that technicians frantically transcribed. They're in every version. Every timeline has them. We're the experiment. We've always been the experiment. They're watching through the sentence was never finished. Mendez vanished mid-word. His body destabilized completely, flickering one final time before disappearing forever. Seconds later, the containment sphere cracked. The accelerator overloaded. The resulting explosion destroyed the entire facility, killing nearly everyone inside. Only one technician survived, thrown clear by the initial blast. He was severely injured, but managed to escape into the mountains. Years later, after defecting to Europe, he shared his account of what happened, including the transcript of Mendez's final words and something else. Something he had never told anyone. In Mendez's final seconds, as his body flickered between visibility and nothingness, the technician saw something standing behind him inside the sphere. A figure that didn't appear human, tall, impossibly thin, with proportions that seemed wrong in ways he couldn't articulate. It was watching, not Mendez, the technicians, the scientists, everyone in the room. As if it had been waiting for them to open that door. Carlos Mendez's final words haunt everyone who studies this case. They're in every version. We've always been the experiment. What did he see on the other side? What are they he was trying to warn us about? And if humanity's attempts to travel through time are themselves being observed, if we are the experiment, then we must ask ourselves the most terrifying question of all. Who is conducting it? What do they want? And have they been watching us all along? Imagine stepping 1 minute into the past, just 60 seconds. You appear beside your past self, shake hands, prove that time travel works, and return to the present a hero. It sounds almost trivially simple compared to the grand ambitions of other experiments. No traveling to ancient civilizations, no witnessing the distant future, just 1 minute backward. What could possibly go wrong? In 2019, a private research team in Switzerland discovered the answer to that question. And the answer was everything. Everything could go wrong. Because when Dr. Thomas Ericson stepped onto that platform, he didn't travel 1 minute into the past. He fell into an infinite loop of arrivals and departures that aged him centuries in minutes and left him screaming a single sentence that no one who heard it will ever forget. The facility was located on a private research campus outside Zurich, funded by a consortium of technology billionaires obsessed with achieving what governments had failed to accomplish. Their approach was different from military programs. They weren't interested in grand temporal voyages. They wanted proof of concept. The smallest possible displacement that would demonstrate time travel was achievable. 1 minute, 60 seconds backward. Their lead engineer was Dr. Thomas Ericson, a 43-year-old physicist who had spent 2 decades refining the mathematics of temporal mechanics. When the device was finally ready for human testing, Ericson insisted on being the first subject. He had staked his entire career on this moment. He refused to let anyone else take the risk. The experiment was elegantly designed. At exactly 2:47 p.m., Ericson would step onto the displacement platform. The machine would activate, sending him 60 seconds into the past. At 2:46 p.m., a second Ericson would materialize beside the platform, standing next to his past self, who had not yet been displaced. 2 versions of the same man existing simultaneously, proving beyond any doubt that temporal displacement was possible. The calculations had been checked 1,000 times. Every variable had been accounted for. At precisely 2:47 p.m., Thomas Ericson stepped onto the platform. The machinery hummed to life. His body shimmered, distorted, and vanished. His colleagues watched the clock. 2:46 p.m. came and went. No second Ericson appeared. Confusion rippled through the control room. Then, at 2:47:01 p.m., 1 second after the original displacement, an Ericson materialized on the platform. But he wasn't standing calmly beside his past self. He was screaming. Before anyone could react, he vanished again. At 2:47:02, another Ericson appeared, also screaming, also vanishing after exactly 1 second. At 2:47:03, another, and another, and another. The cascade had begun. Ericsons continued materializing at 1 second intervals, each one slightly older than the last, each one's face contorted in absolute terror, each one disappearing exactly 1 second after arrival. The control room descended into chaos. Technicians scrambled to shut down the equipment, but nothing responded. The machine had created a recursion loop, a closed circuit where Ericson's arrival triggered his displacement, which triggered his arrival infinitely. The mathematics were nightmarish. Each cycle aged Ericson by approximately 1 hour of subjective time. Every second that passed in the laboratory represented an hour of experience for the man trapped inside the loop. Researchers watched helplessly as version after version appeared and vanished, each one more aged, more terrified, more broken than the last. The cascade continued for 14 minutes. 847 Ericsons materialized on that platform before the equipment finally overloaded and exploded. The last one to appear was barely recognizable as human, skeletal, withered, skin like paper stretched over bone. He survived for 3 seconds longer than the others, long enough to speak. His voice was a ragged whisper, but every person in that room heard it clearly. "I've been falling for 1,000 years." Then he collapsed and died, and the platform fell silent. The mathematics suggested 847 cycles at 1 hour per cycle should have aged Ericson approximately 35 days. But his body showed centuries of deterioration. The loop may have continued far longer than their instruments could measure. Perhaps it never truly ended. Perhaps some part of Thomas Ericson is still falling through that infinite recursion, aging an hour every second, experiencing years of terror compressed into moments. He didn't travel through time, he fell into it. A single misstep that became an eternal plunge, and his final words echo through the minds of everyone who studies this case. "I've been falling for 1,000 years." How long did it feel like to him? How long is he still falling? Some questions have no answers, and some doors, once opened, can never be closed. This final case is different from everything you've heard before. There are no official documents, no named facilities, no identified subjects. It exists only in fragments, pieces of information that surfaced briefly online before being systematically erased. Leaked emails, deleted forum posts, a single video that circulated for less than 72 hours before vanishing from every platform on the internet. But if the accounts are accurate, this wasn't just another experiment. This was an evacuation, a one-way trip for 144 people, including children, sent to a future that turned out to be empty. And not a single one of them has ever come back. In early 2024, a user on an obscure conspiracy forum posted what they claimed was an internal communication from an unnamed government program. The document referenced something called Project Exodus, a contingency protocol designed not to send individuals through time for research or observation, but to evacuate entire groups of essential personnel to a predetermined point in the future should global catastrophe become imminent. Scientists, military strategists, engineers, their families, 144 people selected to preserve humanity's knowledge and leadership in case everything else was lost. The destination was the year 2147, chosen because predictive models suggested it would be far enough removed from any near-term catastrophe while still remaining within calculable temporal parameters. The communication suggested that Exodus had been activated, though it never specified exactly why. References to escalation and point of no return implied some geopolitical or environmental crisis, something serious enough to trigger humanity's most desperate backup plan. But no such crisis ever appeared in public news. Whatever threat prompted the evacuation remains completely unknown. 3 days after the initial post, a video appeared on a different platform, 47 seconds of footage showing a massive underground facility, unlike anything in the previous cases. The displacement platform was enormous, easily large enough to hold over 100 people standing together. The video quality was poor, clearly recorded on a phone from a concealed position, but certain details were unmistakable. Figures in white coats directing families onto the platform, adults holding the hands of children, elderly people being helped up the steps. The terror on some faces was visible even through the grainy footage. These weren't trained operatives or volunteer scientists. These were families, parents clutching their children, people who had been told this was their only chance at survival. In the video's final seconds, the platform activates. Blinding light surrounds the group, so intense that individual figures become nothing but silhouettes against the glare. The light pulses once, twice, and then collapses inward like a dying star, taking everyone with it. The platform is empty. The video ends. Within 72 hours, the footage was deleted from every platform where it had appeared. The original poster's account was terminated. All attempts to verify any details, the facility location, the personnel involved, the program name itself, returned nothing. It was as if the video had never existed, as if those 144 people had never existed. But 3 weeks later, one final piece of evidence surfaced. A photograph appeared on a different forum, posted by an anonymous user who provided no context, no explanation, only the image itself. It showed an underground platform matching the one in the video, the same size, the same configuration, but completely empty, abandoned. And on the wall behind the platform, someone had written a message in what appeared to be ash or soot, 4 words that changed everything. they lied. 2147 was empty. The photograph was deleted within hours, but copies had already spread, and the implications were devastating. If Exodus successfully sent 144 people to the year 2147, and someone managed to return long enough to write that message, what did they find? An empty future? A dead world? No cities? No civilization? No humanity at all? The message suggests someone came back, if only briefly. Someone who discovered that the future they had been promised didn't exist. But they didn't bring anyone with them. They didn't rescue the families, the children. They only brought a warning. And then they too disappeared. Forever. 144 people stepped onto that platform believing they were being saved. Mothers, fathers, children who didn't understand what was happening. They were sent to a future that was supposed to shelter them. Instead, they found nothing. And now they're trapped there, 123 years from now, in an empty world with no way home. Were they lied to? Was 2147 always empty? Or did something happen to humanity before they arrived? The platform sits silent. The message remains. And 144 people, including children, are still waiting in a future that forgot to exist. Every experiment promised breakthrough. Every subject believed they would return. And yet, across decades and continents, the pattern repeats. People step into machines designed to conquer time and simply cease to exist. Perhaps time travel is possible. Perhaps it works exactly as intended. But perhaps the destination is the problem. Maybe the future is empty because no one who travels there can ever come back. The machines work perfectly. It's the return that's impossible.